the most ruined in endogamy, what remains after 100 years of family crossing. In the depths of the Appalachian Mountains, hidden between foggy valleys and dense forests, the history of the Caldwell family has remained buried for decades. A clan who, since 1850, has chosen isolation not only geographic but also genetic, creating one of the most devastated lineages for the practice of marriage among close relatives already documented in American territory. This is a journey through time, revealing how decisions made more than a century had irreversibly shaped the fate of whole generations. An investigation into isolation, poverty, and old-fashioned beliefs have transformed a prosperous family of pioneers into a case study on the devastating effects of prolonged endogamy. Our history begins in 1847, when Thomas Caldwell, a prosperous wooden trader from east of Virginia, decided to seek new opportunities in the unexplored lands of the West. Accompanied by his wife Sarah, his 5 children and 2 daughters, as well as 3 brothers and their families, Thomas has established a small community in what we know today as McDowell County, on the border between Kentucky and Western Virginia. "Earth is fertile and coal-rich mountains," wrote Thomas in his personal diary. Recovered in 1978 by local historians. Here, far from the corrupting influences of large cities, we can build a community based on true Christian values and moral purity. What began as a legitimate and promising enterprise would soon face its first major challenge. The American Civil War broke out in 1861, dividing the country and isolating the Caldwell community further. Historical records show that, fearful to be recruited anywhere in the conflict, Caldwell men took their families even more inside the mountains, settling in a locally known remote valley as Hollow Creek. This insulation, initially a protection measure, became permanent after the end of the war. Instead of reintegrating to developing society, Caldwell decided to remain in their mountainous refuge, developing a growing contempt for external influences and a strong sense of self-sufficiency. It was in this context that the first marriage between first-degree cousins in the family occurred. In 1879, Joseph Caldwell, grandson of Thomas, joined his cousin Elizabeth. According to Joseph's diary, preserved by Kentucky's Historic Society, this decision was made after a failed attempt to find a wife in the nearest city. "The city's girls are frivolous and impure," wrote Joseph. "Elizabeth knows our customs and values. Our blood is strong, and it will remain." This marriage, considered acceptable at the time in many American rural communities, established a precedent that would be followed with increasing frequency in the following generations. As the family grew and remained isolated, marriage options became increasingly limited. Historian Dr. Margaret Hollingsworth of the University of West Virginia, who extended the Caldwell family records, explains, "What we observed in Caldwell was not just a case of occasional endogamy, but a systematic practice that intensified over several generations. Around 1920, virtually all family members were multiple descendants, common ancestors. The first visible signs of the effects of this continuous intersection appeared in the 3rd generation of consanguineous marriages. Medical records of 1915, found in the estate of a local doctor, document the birth of 3 Caldwell children with atypical physical characteristics, including extra fingers, underdeveloped jaws, and significant cognitive difficulties. Dr. Elijah Montgomery, a rural physician who occasionally attended to the community, noted his observations with growing concern. Caldwell's problematic births became alarmingly frequent. I tried to warn them about the risks of close relatives, but I was received with hostility and accusations of external interference. The Great Depression of 1929 only intensified the isolation of the family. While the rest of the country struggled with economic difficulties, Caldwell, already used to self-sufficiency and isolation, retreated even more from contact with the outside world. It was during this period that the practice of marriages between siblings and half-siblings began to occur, according to documents recovered later. In 1937, a social worker sent as part of the New Deal initiatives to assist isolated rural communities managed to briefly visit Caldwell settlement. His report, filed with the Congress Library, offers a disturbing glimpse. The Caldwell community approximately 60 individuals live in conditions of extreme poverty and isolation. I observed numerous cases of obvious physical deformities and atypical behaviors. When I questioned the prevalence of these conditions, I was informed that they were considered marks of family distinction. I recommend immediate intervention by public health authorities. Despite this recommendation, no significant intervention occurred. With the beginning of World War II, government resources were redirected, and the Caldwell family continued their path of isolation and endogamic marriage practices. Check it out if you are already subscribed to this channel, so as not to lose the most impactful revelations about hidden consanguinity stories that have shaped entire communities and left devastating genetic legacies that persist to this day. The 1950s marked a critical point in the history of the Caldwell family. It was during this period that the almost a century genetic consequences of consanguineous marriages became impossible to ignore, even for family members themselves. A non-official census conducted in 1952 by local health authorities, who finally got access to the community, documented that of the 82 Caldwell family members living in Hollow Creek, 37 had significant physical anomalies. These included reduced stature, craniophyseal malformations, cast fingers, syndactylia, severely compromised view, and varying degrees of cognitive impairment. Dr. Harold Jenkins, a geneticist at the University of Louisville who studied Caldwell medical records in the 1970s, offers a scientific explanation for what happened. What we observed in the Caldwell family is a classic example of how endogamy intensifies the expression of harmful recessive genes. In a diverse population, these genes rarely find their pair. They have descendants. The likelihood of these recessive genes, if they find, dramatically increases. The Caldwell family situation remained widely unknown to the American public until 1956, when a journalist from Louisville Courier-Journal, Robert Thornton, heard rumors about a mountain family with unusual characteristics. Initially interested in writing an article of human interest on rural life in the Appalachians, Thornton eventually discovered something much more disturbing. With considerable difficulty, and after gaining the confidence of some younger members of the family who occasionally visited the nearest city to sell handicrafts, Thornton managed to visit the Caldwell community. The article he published next, entitled "The Forgotten Valley," caused national sensation. "Hidden in the mountains of our own state," wrote Thornton, "see Americans that time has forgotten. The Caldwell family exists in almost complete isolation, perpetuating marriage practices that modern science has long recognized as harmful. The result is a community where genetic deformities and cognitive deficiencies have become the norm, not the exception. The article, accompanied by photographs showing precarious living conditions and family members with obvious physical anomalies, caused immediate reactions. Social assistance organizations, religious groups, and state authorities have announced plans to intervene. However, the Caldwell family response was to withdraw even more deeply in its isolation, blocking Hollow Creek access and threatening any outsider that tried to approach. One of the most disturbing aspects revealed by Thornton's investigation was the family developed belief system to justify their marriage practices. Interviews with more communicative members of the family revealed a peculiar ideology that mixed distorted interpretations of religious texts with a strong sense of genetic exceptionality. Caldwell blood is special, said family patriarch Jeremiah Caldwell in a rare interview with Thornton. The outer world is contaminated. We preserve our purity through generations, and marks in our bodies are signs of our distinction, not curses like the ignorant believe. This belief in the superiority of family blood was used to justify even the most extreme cases of endogamy, including unions between parents and children and siblings, documented in family records later recovered. Dr. Elizabeth Harrington, a cultural anthropologist who has studied isolated communities from the Appalachians, explains this phenomenon. What we see in Caldwell is a classic example of how prolonged isolation can lead to the development of belief systems that justify harmful practices. As negative genetic effects became more evident, the family developed a narrative that transformed these consequences into marks of marked distinction or even blessings. The 1960s brought significant changes to the region, with government programs such as President Johnson's War on Poverty, specifically focusing on the isolated communities of the Appalachians. Roads have been improved, built schools, and expanded social services. These initiatives finally began to reach even the most isolated corners of the mountains. In 1967, social workers and health professionals, accompanied by state police, finally got access to Hollow Creek after receiving anonymous reports on inhuman conditions involving children, which they found even shocked the most experienced professionals. The situation exceeds our appropriate description, wrote social worker Clara Roberts in her official report. Children with severe deformities live without access to basic medical care. We have identified several cases of individuals with urgent medical needs who have never received any form of treatment. The level of cognitive impairment in many cases makes the consent capacity informed in marriage relations that continue to occur. This intervention resulted in the removal of 14 Caldwell children, all under 12, who were placed in the state's custody due to hazardous and inadequate living conditions. The action generated violent resistance from some family members, resulting in the death of 2 state police and 3 Caldwell men during an armed confront that became locally known as the Hollow Creek Siege. The 1970s marked an inflection point in the history of the Caldwell family. After the violent confrontation of 1967, the state authorities established a permanent presence in the region, ensuring that social and health services could finally reach the isolated community. The 14 children removed from Hollow Creek in 1967 became the object of intense medical and psychological study. A comprehensive report, published in 1972 by the Department of Health of the state of Kentucky, documented in detail the genetic consequences of generations of endogamy. Young Caldwell have a constellation of consistent anomalies with high levels of genetic homozygosis, observed Dr. Richard Stevenson, the main geneticist of the study. We documented an alarming incidence of rare conditions, including polydactyly, palatal cleft, congenital heart disease, skeletal dysplasia, and microcephaly. More worrying is the fact that many individuals have multiple conditions simultaneously, something rarely observed even in populations with high rates of consanguineous marriages. Stevenson's study revealed that the endogamy coefficient, a measure of an individual's probability inheriting identical genes of both parents, was exceptionally high among Caldwell. In a general population, this coefficient is close to 0. Between first-degree cousins, it is approximately 0.0625. Among the young Caldwell studied, the values ranged from 0.25 to impressive 0.375, levels usually expected only in relations between complete siblings or between parents and children. These discoveries have quickly become a case of study in American medical schools, dramatically illustrating the risks of prolonged endogamy. The Caldwell case has significantly contributed to the development of more rigorous laws against consanguineous marriages in various states during the 1970s. 4 family members who remained in Hollow Creek. Government intervention has brought profound and not always welcome changes. Social workers reported continuous resistance to changes in marriage practices, even in the face of clear evidence of the resulting genetic damage. Martha Caldwell, then 42, and one of the few family members without obvious physical anomalies, emerged as an influential voice in this period. In an interview with a documentary filmmaker in 1975, she offered a glimpse of family thinking. "You come here with your diplomas and laws, saying that our way of living is wrong. But who are you to judge? For generations, Caldwell took care of yours. We love our children, no matter how they are born. In the outside world, they would be ridiculed and rejected. Here, they are family." This perspective, although understandable in human terms, dramatically contrasted with the medical evidence of the damage caused by the marriage practices of the family. Dr. James Montgomery, a psychologist who worked extensively with family members during this period, noted, "What we witnessed to Caldwell is a form of isolation that transcends the geographical throughout generations. They have developed a system of beliefs that normalizes harmful practices and reinterprets negative consequences as positive. Breaking this cycle requires more than just assist medical or legal intervention, requires a complete cultural reorientation. If you are following this story here, stop right now and leave the phrase in the comments. The blood that unites also condemns. His participation is fundamental for us to continue bringing these stories that reveal the darkest songs of human experience. In 1977, a tragic event further shook the already fragile Caldwell community. A fire, apparently caused by a knocked lamp, quickly consumed several of the precarious wooden housing in Hollow Creek. 5 family members, all with reduced mobility due to genetic conditions, perished in the flames. This incident catalyzed a new wave of government intervention, the state authorities citing dangerously inadequate living conditions, ordered the complete evacuation of Hollow Creek. The 37 remaining members of the family were relocated to subsidized houses in 2 small towns in the region. This forced dispersion, although traumatic for many family members, had the effect of finally breaking the extreme isolation cycle. For the first time in over a century, Caldwell were forced to interact regularly with the widest society. Dr. Catherine Reynolds, a sociologist who accompanied the process of relocation, documented the difficulties of adaptation. We observed extreme levels of social anxiety, institutional distrust, and difficulty adapting to basic social norms. For many of the adult Caldwell, especially those with cognitive limitations, the transition was deeply traumatic. The children, on the other hand, showed remarkable resilience and adaptability. A particularly remarkable aspect of this period was the medical community's reaction to Caldwell's specific needs. Hazard Regional Hospital, Kentucky, has established a specialized clinic dedicated to treating the numerous health conditions that afflict the family. This initiative has become a pioneering model for the treatment of rare genetic conditions in rural communities. Dr. Harold Jenkins, who has supervised the clinic, wrote in 1979, "The medical challenges presented by the Caldwell family are unprecedented in my career. We are essentially treating the consequences of an involuntary genetic experiment that extended for more than a century. Each patient has a unique constellation of conditions, many of which rarely seen jointly in conventional medical practice." The 1980s brought significant advances in the scientific understanding of the Caldwell case, coinciding with important developments in medical genetics. With the emergence of new techniques of chromosomal analysis and genetic mapping, researchers were finally able to start documenting accurately the exact mechanisms by which prolonged endogamy had affected the family. In 1982, the University of Kentucky began an ambitious genealogical and genetic study of Caldwell, led by Dr. Richard Stevenson. The study, which would extend for 6 years, involved the collection of biological samples of 78 living members of the family and the meticulous reconstruction of its complete genealogical tree using historical records, family daily, and interviews. What we found was truly unprecedented in Western medical literature, Stevenson reported in his preliminary conclusions. The Caldwell family possibly represents the most extensive and most documented case of systematic endogamy in the modern United States, comparable to some historical European real dynasties or extremely isolated communities in other parts of the world. Genetic analysis revealed that, after generations of consanguineous crosses, the Caldwell genome had become exceptionally homogeneous. Harmful recessive genes, which would usually remain hidden in a diverse population, had become prevalent. The study identified 27 specific genetic mutations that occurred at alarmingly high frequencies among family members. Among the most significant findings was the identification of a specific mutation in the PA gene, responsible for a rare form of phenylketonuria, a metabolic condition that, when untreated, causes progressive neurological impairment. This particular mutation, nicknamed Caldwell variant in medical literature, had not been previously documented and seemed to be exclusive to the family. This mutation probably arose in a single ancestor at the beginning of family history and, under normal circumstances, would have remained a genetic rarity, explained Dr. Stevenson. However, Due to repeated consanguineous marriages, the mutation has spread widely within the family lineage, affecting approximately 40% of the living members of the family to some degree. The publication of these results in 1988 on the prestigious American Journal Magazine of Human Genetics generated intense discussion in the scientific community and renewed the public interest in the case. A documentary produced by PBS entitled Blood Legacy: The History of Caldwell reached a national audience and brought unprecedented attention to the risks of endogamy and the specific situation of the family. For the Caldwell themselves, the 1980s was a period of continuous and difficult adaptation. Younger generations, particularly those born after the dispersion of the family in 1977, began to integrate with the wider society, with varying degrees of success. Rebecca Caldwell, born in 1968, and one of the children removed during the initial intervention, became an important family spokesman. Despite presenting some of the typical physical characteristics of family lineage, including extra fingers on both hands, Rebecca showed remarkable intellectual capacity and determination. After completing her high school with honors, she got a scholarship for the University of Kentucky. Carried a name Caldwell proudly, Rebecca declared an exciting speech during a conference on rare genetic diseases in 1989, not because of the choices my ancestors have made, but despite them. Our history serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of isolation and ignorance, but also the remarkable resilience of the human spirit. For older members of the family, however, the adaptation proved extremely challenging. Many, especially those with significant cognitive impairment, have never completely adjusted to life outside Hollow Creek. Period social assistance records document high depression rates, self-destructive behavior, and even suicides among adult Caldwell. Ezekiel Caldwell, born in 1932, and one of the last patriarchs of the original community, remained a vocal critic of government intervention until his death in 1985. In one of his last interviews, he expressed a feeling shared by many of the oldest Caldwell. "You have taken us out of our land, have separated our families, and treat us as specimens in their laboratories. They say it was for our own good, but look at us now. We are scattered, lost without our community. In Hollow Creek, we had purpose and belonging. What do we have now?" This perspective contrasted strongly with objective medical data. A follow-up study conducted in 1986 documented significant improvements in the health and life expectancy of younger Caldwell who received regular medical care. Particularly notable was the fact that, since the dispersion of the family and the consequent cessation of consanguineous marriages, no new child had been born with the most severe forms of genetic conditions that characterized previous generations. Dr. Eleanor Williams, a genetic specialized pediatrician who worked extensively with Caldwell children during this time, noted, "We are witnessing in real time how genetic diversification can reverse the damage caused by generations of endogamy. Caldwell children born with individuals outside the family have dramatically less congenital anomalies." Validation of the basic principles of population genetics. As the decade came to an end, it became increasingly clear that the intervention, despite its traumatic aspects, had effectively interrupted a cycle of cumulative genetic damage that could have led to the complete unfeasibility of family lineage within a few generations. As we approach the present, The history of the Caldwell family becomes a case study about the dangers of endogamy to a more complex narrative on inheritances, identity, and reconciliation. The 1990s and 2000s witnessed both persistent and remarkable challenges to the descendants of this singular family lineage. In 1992, Dr. Richard Stevenson and his team published his definitive study on Caldwell, a monumental work that meticulously documented 6 generations of family history and its genetic effects. The study, considered a milestone in the literature on isolated populations genetics, revealed that the average endogamy coefficient between Caldwell born before 1977 was approximately 8 times larger than that observed in communities where marriages between first-degree cousins occur occasionally. The Caldwell case represents an almost parallel extreme in modern medical literature, concluded Stevenson. The observed genetic consequences offer exceptionally valuable insights on how recessive deleterious genes manifest themselves in highly endogamic populations, with significant implications for our understanding of rare genetic diseases in general. For the Caldwell themselves, the 1990s was marked by a process, gradual social integration and, in some cases, reconciliation with its legacy complex. In 1994, there was a significant event when Rebecca Caldwell, now graduated in social work and working with isolated rural communities, organized the first formal meeting of the family since the Hollow Creek dispersion. More than 120 Caldwell of various generations attended the event, held at a state park near the original place of the family settlement. For many of the younger members, it was the first opportunity to fully understand the extension of their family history. "We are not here to celebrate the choices that led our family to so many difficulties," said Rebecca in his opening speech. "We are here to recognize our survival and our determination to break the cycle. Knowing our story is the first step in ensuring that it does not repeat itself." The meeting has become an annual event, gradually evolving from a family meeting to an informal conference on rare genetic conditions. In 1999, the Caldwell Foundation for Genetic Research was officially established, with the mission of supporting studies on rare genetic diseases and educational programs on endogamy risks. While some family members actively embraced their role as educators and lawyers, others fought the persistent stigma associated with the name Caldwell. Judicial documents show that between 1990 and 2005, at least 28 individuals with ancestral Caldwell have legally petitioned to change their surnames, citing discrimination and harassment. James Caldwell, born in 1970, unaffected by polydactyly and other physical family anomalies, described his experience in an article published in 2002, "Growing Up as a Caldwell Means. Carrying its genetic history not only in your body, but also in your name. Each presentation, each job interview, each first date is preceded by the inevitable question, Caldwell." Despite these challenges, the first decade of the 21st century also witnessed remarkable success stories among descendants Caldwell. Dr. Michael Johnston, a geneticist at Johns Hopkins University who accompanied the family for decades, observed in 2010, "What we see now, 3 decades after the intervention that dispersed the family, is a remarkable demonstration of human resilience. Many of the younger Caldwell, born after the end of consanguineous marriages, are carrying productive and healthy lives, some despite significant genetic conditions. It is a testimony of both the potential of medical intervention and the importance of appropriate social support systems. A particularly significant milestone occurred in 2007 when Thomas Caldwell, great-grandson of Hollow Creek's last patriarch, became the first family member to graduate in medicine, specializing in medical genetics. Dr. Thomas Caldwell dedicated his career to studying and treating the same conditions that affected generations of his own family. "My family history is not just a legacy," he declared in his graduation ceremony. "It is a responsibility and an opportunity. Few doctors have such an intimate understanding of the conditions that treat me. This personal knowledge informs every aspect of my practice." In 2012, the publication of the book, Blood of My Blood, the Caldwell Saga, written by historian and anthropologist Dr. Margaret Hollingsworth, brought renewed public attention to family history. The book, meticulously researched and sensitive in its approach, became a national bestseller and was later adapted to an acclaimed documentary series. This renewed exposure has generated both benefits and challenges. On the one hand, it significantly increased public awareness of the risks of endogamy and the importance of genetic diversity. On the other hand, it revived the sensational interest that many Caldwell had fought to leave behind. In response, the Caldwell Foundation has intensified its educational efforts, developing curriculum programs for medical schools and creating informative resources for isolated rural communities where endogamic practices still occur occasionally. Today, more than 150 years after Thomas Caldwell leads his family to the isolation of the Appalachian Mountains, his descendants remain a powerful memory of the long-term consequences of genetic isolation. Conditions that afflict many family members will continue to demand specialized medical care throughout their lives, and the name Caldwell still carries a stigma in parts of Kentucky and Western Virginia. However, the family's trajectory also represents a narrative of hope and transformation. Caldwell's latest generations, born after the end of endogamic marriage practices, have drastically fewer severe genetic conditions, and those who still care. They irrigate the genetic markers of family endogamy, have access to medical care and social support that their ancestors could never imagine. In 2015, a comprehensive study conducted by the University of Kentucky compared genetic data from 5 generations of Caldwell, graphically demonstrating how genetic diversification occurred in the last 4 decades began to reverse the legacy of endogamy. The study revealed that the frequency of deleterious recessive genes, although still high compared to the general population, had significantly diminished among Caldwell born after 1980. What we observe in contemporary Caldwell is a fascinating example of how genetic flow can begin to recover a severely compromised lineage, explained Dr. Jennifer Ramirez, the main author of the study. Although the effects of historical endogamy are still evident, each new generation shows measurable signs of greater genetic vigor for approximately 250 individuals, who today can trace their lineage directly to the original Hollow Creek inhabitants. This research has offered a new perspective on its place in American medical and social history. Particularly remarkable was the development in 2018 of an experimental genetic therapy specifically directed to the Caldwell variant of phenylketonuria, the unique genetic mutation identified decades earlier by Dr. Stevenson. This therapy, developed with the active participation of family members affected by the condition, demonstrated promising results in initial clinical trials. Dr. Thomas Caldwell, who participated in the development team, described the meaning of this advance. It is deeply moving to see how our family suffering is being transformed into knowledge that benefits not only Caldwell, but potentially anyone affected by similar genetic conditions. In a way, we are redeeming our history. A less visible but equally significant dimension of Caldwell's contemporary history involves the continuous struggles of the oldest members of the family, those born during the height of endogamic practices in Hollow Creek. For many of these individuals, now in their 60s and 70s, complete social integration has never been fully achieved. Harold Caldwell, born in 1955 and affected by multiple characteristic conditions of the family, including moderate cognitive impairment, reflected on this reality in a recorded testimonial. For the Caldwell Foundation archives in 2020, sometimes I feel that we exist between two worlds. We are very Caldwell to be completely accepted in the outside world, but we were also separated from the life we knew. Hollow Creek was not perfect, I know that now, but it was the only place where I never felt different. This feeling of persistent displacement led the Caldwell Foundation to establish Caldwell County's Caldwell Community Center in 2019, not far from the original Hollow Creek place. The center offers assisted housing to family members with special needs, as well as educational and support programs for all Caldwell descendants. The center is not an attempt to recreate the isolation of Hollow Creek, explains Rebecca Caldwell, now executive director of the foundation. It's exactly the opposite of space, where Caldwell can connect with their roots as they remain fully engaged with the widest society. It's about honoring our history without being limited by it. As we approach the present, it is impossible not to reflect on the profound lessons offered by the Caldwell saga. Its history vividly illustrates the dangers of extreme isolation and prolonged endogamy, but also the remarkable human ability to adapt and renew. The genetic records of Caldwell, now digitally preserved as part of the Human Genome Project, will continue to inform our scientific understanding for generations, and their social journey, from extreme imprisonment to gradual reintegration, offers valuable insights on how isolated communities can be effectively supported without completely destroying their cultural identity. Perhaps the deepest lesson comes from the very words of Martha Caldwell, who, in her last interview before she died in 2008 at the age of 75, offered a moving reflection. For a long time, we thought we were protecting ourselves from the outside world. Only then did we realize that we were also imprisoning ourselves. The blood we shared is important. It connects us through generations. But it is in the mix of different bloods that we find strength and renewal. This is the truth that I wish we had understood a century ago. Today, while new Caldwell are born in radically different circumstances from their ancestors, their history remains a powerful reminder of the dangers of extreme isolation and the vital importance of genetic diversity for human health, and a story that deserves to be remembered not only by Caldwell themselves, but by all of us. If you watched so far, it is because you like this story. Leave a comment saying "I watched here," so I can meet you and know who really likes the stories here on the channel. Be sure to leave your like and share this video with friends and family who are interested in these fascinating stories about the human condition. And of course, if you are not yet registered Take the opportunity to sign up now and activate the notification bell so as not to lose our next investigations into the darkest secrets in human history.